Good morning. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Hopping on to share with you some thoughts that were coming up for me this morning. One of the things as we are making way into the new year, if you were following me last week, we took a look at micro transformations for change that sticks. You can find those videos inside the Facebook group or on the YouTube channel, wherever you are catching this video. And as I'm moving forward, one of the things that I chose to integrate into my daily practice is journaling. Now, am I doing it every day? It's a work in progress, but I'm also taking some inspiration from The Artist's Way. If anyone is familiar with that book, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments if that is something you have worked through that book and that process before, or perhaps that is something with this new year and looking for ways to spark our inspiration and tune back into our creativity. Maybe you are digging into The Artist's Way right now. Let me know. I find a lot of merit from this permission to play, creating space to put priority on creativity. So as I was writing out my morning pages, I started making a list of all the ways that I blow off stress. I let the steam out of the kettle. I hit the reset button. I lighten the load. You might have heard myself or other people talk about the stress bucket. The way this bucket that we carry starts to fill with stress. Sneaky stressors, as I call them, coming from the aspects of physical, emotional, or environmental influences. So that might be not getting enough sleep. That might be eating too much convenience food and not getting enough of the phytonutrients, the powerful healing chemicals from plants and fruits and vegetables, that our body needs to turn down the flame of inflammation. Inflammation is stress on the body. Stress sparks inflammation. It's one of those cycles. So how can we stop this cycle? How can we stop stress from escalating the way that it does? So I was thinking about some of these ways, and I was remembering a conversation with a dear friend of mine who now is a chief executive with a medical group. He helps to oversee a pretty good number of health clinics back in the heartland where I grew up. And that was one of the things that he noticed, through the course of the day, through the series of interactions, the meetings that you have, the phone calls, the things that come up, that stress load builds. How do you reset that bucket or clear the scale so that the next person who comes into your office isn't the unlikely winner of tipping those scales and really being the trigger that lets your stress get the better of you and lets that emotion take over, lets reaction beat out the response that we want to consider and bring forth. So how do we do that? How do we stay ahead of the curve? That's why I like to think of it as emptying the bucket or hitting reset on stress. And in a few weeks, coming up pretty soon, I am going to be offering again a program that I shared previously, Reset Stress for Success, that has some powerful tools to change your perception of stress, to transform your relationship. So you start to see ways in which you can be empowered to manage the stress that shows up in your life or that we allow into our lives, rather than feeling like all we can do is react, is be on the defense when it comes to stress. That is one of those, again, self-perpetuating cycles that is dangerous. And I hate to see people caught up in it. So to stay ahead of the curve, to lighten the load, how do we reset stress when it starts building up? On another day, I'll get into how we can address those sneaky stressors, physical, emotional, and environmental. Those are great conversations in and of themselves. But today, on Thursday, we're pretty well through the week. We're racing through the month of January. It looks like 2022 is going to fly right by. So how do we make the most of the hours and the days that we have available? So there are a couple of ways that you can reset stress. First of all, it's helpful to recognize that exercise helps to metabolize those hormones of stress that get dumped into our bloodstream. Cortisol and adrenaline spur a biological reaction. It makes our pulse rise. It makes our breath change. It makes us want to respond physically. Stress biologically is wired into our systems to help us stay safe. So that biological response still happens and we want to react. If you're able to turn that emotion into motion, that can be really powerful. So maybe after a meeting that's got your stress coming up, you get out of the office, take a walk, take a walk around the building, take a walk around the block, get your blood moving and help that those molecules of emotion move through your system so they're not still circulating and wreaking havoc. How else can you move? Maybe you can't get out of your office. One thing that's really great for spurring help is a rebounder. Rebounders, those little mini trampolines, help to spur on your lymphatic drainage system, which is our cleaning system. It helps to remove toxins and waste from cells throughout our body, process that so it can be discharged. So a rebounder is great for boosting your lymphatic system, boosting your immunity. It can also be a great way to get some of that energy out, to move it out. You don't have that. Not everybody has enough space in the office. Maybe you can stack it against the wall when it's not in use. You can look for other ways to move. Have some music, maybe some headphones if you can't blast some music in your office for a few minutes. Get up and dance or just stand and shake your body, anything to get some movement, get that blood moving so that that physical reaction of stress gets to see its purpose, gets to be expressed so that you can hit that reset. Beyond physical movement to reset stress, what else can we do? Tuning into our breath can be very powerful. And you might not be aware, I've seen a study, and I find this really fascinating, that when we are reading emails, and I would venture to guess other material online, when we're reading on the computer, we tend to hold our breath. And when we are not breathing deeply and oxygenating our body, which also helps to remove waste from our system, then the stress can compound. So in those situations of stress, and this is something you can do absolutely anywhere, in the middle of a meeting, face to face with somebody on the phone, check in with your breath. When you feel those emotions start to rise, draw your breath down into your belly, engage your body, make the full advantage of our capacity for fresh air and oxygenation. So tune into your breath. You might also be a little expressive with your breath. Release some fiery breaths. Let that out. If you can't say the words that you want to say, maybe a nice deep sigh, a fiery exhale, something like that can help you to move your breath. Also, tuning into those exhales, a nice deep inhale followed by a longer extended exhale is a really effective way to lower your heart rate. We can affect our biology very directly by the practices that we use. So these are some other tips you might use to express that stress. I would also suggest that there are some ways that physically you can express the stress, not physically like getting up and moving again with my hands, you might think so, but writing it out. Have a notebook where you can really have a brain dump. Write out all the words that you can't perhaps say to someone. Let those emotions be recognized and expressed. When we're in face-to-face situations, that stress comes up, and this is not the appropriate place to say everything that your mind is spinning out. Put it down on paper. We can't put a lid on those emotions because they are just simmering on the back of the stove and waiting for the opportunity to explode. So write it out on paper, or have a sketch pad with some nice thick paper, some nice thick markers, and maybe just scribble. Use some expression, use some force, and get it out that way. So have a journal, have a sketch pad, have some colored pens or markers, and think about ways that you might express yourself that way as well. So through movement, through tuning into your breath, through writing and drawing, expressing yourself that way, those are just some tips that came to mind. I'd love to hear if you have ways that you release the valve on stress, if you have a way to hit that reset button so that you can lower the load, so you can clear the slate, so that you can have very present, very honest interactions with the people who come your way. At the end of the day, when you get home to your family and the people that you love, that's not the place where you're still releasing that stress. You can come home and be present and fresh and have the connected relationships that you desire. Let me know if you have tips. I'd love to know what works for you, or if I shared one today that you're not familiar with that you might try and put into your own practice. Thank you for joining me. I'm wishing you well. Take good care of yourself and of each other. And I'll see you back here super soon.